Here's another essay for the short story 11. The question was, why do you believe Mrs. Price acted the way she did? Today I wish I was 102 instead of 11, because if I was 102, I'd have known what to say when Mrs. Price put the red sweater on my desk. Now, it's a very good idea to begin my essay with a quote, especially if this quote is from the story. Now, you chose the right quote to start with because this briefly summarizes the story and is related to the question, because we don't want to waste a lot of time in the introduction trying to summarize the story for the reader without actually tackling the point of the whole thing, which is answering the question. So here you're talking about Mrs. Price and how she, or what she did, which was putting the sweater on Rachel's desk. Now, in this selection, Rachel wished to be 102 because she would have known how to tell Mrs. Price that this ugly sweater did not belong to her. And allowing Mrs. Price to forcefully something Rachel claim the sweater. Okay, so basically you're saying that you're explaining the quote that you used, the selection that you used as you call it, just basically saying that she wished she knew what to do and to fight back when Mrs. Price forced the sweater on her. Mrs. Price acted the way she did because she did not want to be humiliated for being incorrect. Let me just stop here for a minute. Mrs. Price acted the way she did is a very good choice of words because the question was, why do you believe Mrs. Price acted the way she did? It's not nice to keep on repeating that throughout the story. However, in my introduction, when I'm answering the question, it is preferable to use the same wording from the question when you're answering the question so that the reader knows that you're answering the question. So this is good. Mrs. Price acted the way she did because she did not want to be humiliated for being incorrect. So that's number one, first reason. Comma. She wanted to show the class that she was to be respected. Number two. And to also get rid of the sweater. That's number three. She just wanted to get rid of the sweater. Okay, she did not want to be humiliated, comma, she wanted. So you chose your parallelism to be between she did not or she wanted and she wanted here. The last one should be and she wanted to get rid of the sweater. Okay? You can't have two of them starting with she and then the third just the verb. You can either have the first one with she, so she did not want to be humiliated, comma, wanted to show to the class, comma, and to get rid of the sweater, for example, that may work. But having two she's at the beginning, right here, she did, and then she wanted, and then no she at the end, the sentence is not parallel. You could have divided the sentence into two sentences instead of one big sentence. One sentence with the first two reasons, and then a third sentence starting with furthermore, also, moreover, and then you give me your third reason. However, you did answer the question. You do have three clear reasons, and that is perfect. To begin, now of course, we're not going to put this on the test, okay? An indent, you're just going to leave some space at the beginning like you did, but without this dash. To begin, Mrs. Price did not want to be proven wrong by Rachel, who is a typical student in her class. In the selection, it stated, you can just say in the story, not in the selection, okay? That's not, I don't, you're not mine, Rachel said. Now, you need to say that Rachel's the one who's saying this, okay? So you could just say right away, in the story, Rachel said, or you can say Rachel says, or Rachel said, and then the quote right away. You don't have to say in the selection or in the story, it's stated. Of course it is yours, Mrs. Price says, I remember you wearing it once, and so on. Therefore, comma, when you start with therefore, or however, or similar words at the beginning of a sentence, you put a comma after it. Therefore, this shows Mrs. Price had known that the sweater was not supposed to be in Rachel's possession, since Rachel has stated it as a fact. Now, we have a few problems here. Therefore, this shows, this here is an ambiguous pronoun. What is this that shows? It's everything you've said before. You need to say this statement, this sentence, this dialogue, this conversation, this something shows that Mrs. Price had known that the sweater was not supposed to be in Rachel's possession, since Rachel had stated it as a fact. I really don't understand what you mean by Rachel had stated it as a fact, but grammatically you need to change has to had, or change the verb altogether. Mrs. Price, don't forget your period here, your point after Mrs., refuses to listen because she was not going to let a child, don't put between parentheses Rachel, she was not going to let Rachel, comma, a child, comma, easily show the class that Mrs. Price, okay, was incorrect. Okay, so far, so good. There are a few grammar mistakes here, though, that you need to note and not do on the test. Other than that, your first reason is clear. Okay? Let's go on. You do have one problem, though, in this paragraph. You're not using the same tenses. See, here you said Mrs. Price had known. Then we said Rachel had stated. This is the past perfect. After a while, you say Mrs. Price refuses. This is the present, because she was not going to let a child show the class. Again, that's present. So you're confusing the reader using present and past tenses off and on. You should stick to one tense and try to use it throughout your paragraph. Furthermore, comma, Mrs. Price wanted the class to know that she was to be respected as any other teacher. Just as, you need to add like just here, just as any other teacher would not want to deal with any nonsense from a student. Okay. For example, comma, and then you have a quote. And then you continue the quote and you say Rachel says, but it's not. Okay, very good. Mrs. Price says. So you do have a quote, and you need to have a quote in each of the paragraphs, so that's really good. In other terms, Mrs. Price wanted the student to understand that disrespect towards Mrs. Price and foolish actions were not tolerated in any circumstance, were not tolerated under any circumstance. In addition, okay, so nice beginning for each of your paragraphs. Mrs. Price was trying to get rid of the sweater that had been in the classroom for a long period of time. In the text, it shows, again, you can just say who's saying this. You don't need to say in the text it shows. Maybe because I'm skinny, maybe because she doesn't like me. That's Sylvia Saldivar says. I think it belongs to Rachel. An ugly sweater like that, all raggedy and old, but Mrs. Price believes her. She takes the sweater and puts it on my desk. Now, this is a very long quote, so I would expect a long paragraph. Okay, if you look here, these are your words, and all of this is from the story. That doesn't really look that good. I'm not saying don't use a long quote, okay? However, I want you to use relevant quotes, things that really have to do with the idea you're presenting in this particular paragraph. However, if you have a real long quote like that, and then just two sentences or something that you wrote, it doesn't look that good. Okay, your whole essay is from the story. You're just copying the story. So we need to have that quote, but we need to have more of your words as well. In a restated manner, not a very good expression. This shows, again, this is an ambiguous pronoun. You have to say this something shows, okay? Remember this idea, this problem, this conversation, this statement, whatever. Shows that Mrs. Price wanted to get rid of the sweater. Or she wanted to rid something of the sweater. So she wanted to rid the class, for example, of the sweater, or she wanted to get rid of the sweater. And chose to believe Sylvia. She did not show any care that if the sweater had belonged to Rachel, Mrs. Price just wanted the sweater in someone's possession, in someone else's possession. Okay, you could have elaborated here more to explain your quote and to prove your point. In conclusion, these are the 3 reasons why Mrs. Price acted the way she did. No, don't say these, okay? In conclusion, Mrs. Price acted the way she did for 3 distinct reasons, period. First, comma, she did not want to be proven incorrect by Rachel, period. Second, comma, she wanted to gain respect and discipline from the students, from her students. And finally, doesn't look good because you already said first and you said second, so you're going to need to put a period and say finally, comma, Mrs. Price wanted to get rid of the sweater, not caring if it did not belong to Rachel because of something. This is like a sentence fragment. It's missing some kind of information here, this sentence. You need to continue it. This shows, ambiguous pronoun like I explained before, that she did a terrible mistake and didn't bother to apologize. Misspelled. Um, Try to not use didn't and won't and isn't. Try to say did not, is not, will not. It looks better. To apologize to Rachel when Phyllis Lopez claimed that she was the rightful owner. Okay. Rachel states it better. That's nice. That's a good idea to say Rachel states it better like you did. The worst part is right before the bell rings for lunch. That stupid Phyllis Lopez, who is even dumber than Sylvia Saldivar, says she remembers the red sweater is hers. I take it off right away and give it to her. Only Mrs. Price pretends like everything's okay. I need a closing sentence here from you. Okay, even though you can close your essay with this quote, if you have something else to say, then that would be a good idea. If you don't, it's fine to close it with a quote. What I do like about what you did, first you have three distinct reasons. The second thing I really like is that you started the introduction, the essay, with a quote that shows the beginning of the story when Mrs. Price put the sweater on Rachel's desk. And then you end your essay and the conclusion with a quote, again summarizing the end of this problem when they finally discover that it's not Rachel's sweater, but Mrs. Price pretends like everything's okay, which again proves that Mrs. Price was wrong. Okay, good job. I hope you benefit from this. Be sure to check out my other videos marking this same essay and other essays for the Bergen Academy's admission test. Good luck.